The Interstellar Voss Academy stood at the edge of the Kepler Nebula, 17 floors of crystalline architecture, its towers catching starlight like cut glass. Every species in the known galaxy sent its brightest young minds here. Arkathi nobles, Drevian scholars, Sulvek warriors, and now, for the first time in the Academy's 300-year history, humans. Emma had arrived alone. She stood at the main gate with a single worn bag over her shoulder, her admission letter folded in her jacket pocket. Around her, alien students moved in clusters, tall, glittering, self-assured. She was 5'4", brown-haired, and unimpressive by any galactic standard. She knew it. She didn't mind. What she did mind was the hand that shot out and blocked her path. Halt. The voice belonged to Joe, a third-year Arkathi cadet whose family had donated an entire wing to the Academy. He was 2 meters tall, his scales iridescent under the nebula's glow, and he had the kind of casual cruelty that came from never once being told no. Identification, Joe said, though he wasn't holding a scanner. He was holding nothing. He simply stood in her way. I have my letter, Emma said. Letters can be forged. Joe's eyes swept over her with visible disdain. Humans were only granted trial admission. That means you enter through the service corridor, not the main gate. Behind him, 2 of his companions, me and New York, both Arkathi, both wearing the gold trim of legacy students, laughed quietly. Emma looked at the gate. She looked at Joe. She smiled. Not warmly, not nervously, but with the particular patience of someone who had already calculated every exit. That policy doesn't exist, she said simply. I checked the admissions handbook. All students use the main gate regardless of species or admission type. Section 4, Paragraph 2. Joe's scales rippled, the Arkathi equivalent of a smirk. Perhaps the handbook was updated. Was it? Emma tilted her head. When... Silence. From the side of the gate, a figure had stopped walking. Dai, a Drevian exchange student, nervous, quiet, the kind who kept his head down, watched with wide amber eyes. He said nothing, but he didn't look away either. Joe stepped closer. You will use the service corridor, human, or you will go home. She will do neither. The voice came from behind Emma, calm as still water, absolute as gravity. Hi, Senior Instructor Hi, stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his silver uniform pressing sharp lines against the morning light. He was Sulvek, old enough to have taught the parents of half the students present, and his presence had a weight that made the air itself seem to straighten up. Joe turned. His confidence flickered, just once, then returned. Instructor, I was merely verifying. You were blocking a registered student from entering through the gate she is entitled to use. Hi's voice did not rise. It didn't need to. Step aside, Cadet Joe. Joe stepped aside. Hi walked to Emma and extended a hand. A human gesture he had learned, she realized, specifically to use now. Cadet Emma, welcome to Voss Academy. I apologize for this delay. Emma shook his hand. Thank you, Instructor. I will escort you to registration myself. He glanced once at Joe, a look that carried an entire disciplinary report in it, and then led Emma through the gate. Word traveled fast at the Academy. By the time Emma reached her dormitory, the story had already mutated through 6 retellings. The human girl who quoted the admissions handbook from memory. The senior instructor who personally escorted her. The legacy cadet who stood down. In the common room that evening, Wait, a Sulvek second year with a reputation for bluntness, dropped into the seat across from Emma without asking. You weren't scared, was said. It wasn't a question. I was a little scared, Emma admitted. You didn't show it. Showing it wouldn't have helped. Was stared at her for a long moment. Humans are strange. Probably. Emma agreed, and went back to her reading. The first real test came 3 weeks later. Voss Academy's combat theory course was run by Jack, not a student, but the Academy's youngest ever appointed combat instructor, a human himself, former Earth Defense Corps, with a service record that the other instructors had quietly looked up and quietly declined to discuss with students. Jack didn't look like much. Medium height, unremarkable build, a small scar above his left eyebrow. He had the unhurried manner of someone who had been in enough genuine danger to find almost everything else restful by comparison. On the first day of class, he stood at the front of the room and looked at his students, a mixed group of species, including Joe, who had been placed in the course as part of his disciplinary restructuring. Combat theory, Jack said. Anyone want to tell me what that means? Me raised a hand. The study of superior force application. No, Jack said pleasantly. New York tried. Strategic dominance through physical or technological advantage. Still no. Jack picked up a data slate and began walking between the desks. Combat theory is the study of what happens when everything goes wrong and you have to think anyway. Superior force is a starting position, not a strategy. You can win from an inferior position. You can lose from a superior one. This course is about the gap between those two facts. Joe leaned back in his seat, arms crossed. Humans lost every major engagement with the Arkathi in the border wars. What could you possibly teach us about winning? The room went quiet. Jack stopped walking. He turned to look at Joe with an expression of mild, genuine interest, the way a scientist might look at an unexpectedly interesting sample. We lost 12 of 17 engagements in the border wars, Jack said. Do you know what happened in the other 5? Joe said nothing. We won them, Jack continued, with less than 40% of the resources your forces had deployed, which means your military analysts spent the next 6 years trying to figure out how. He smiled, not unkindly. That's what I'm here to teach. You're welcome to be skeptical. Skepticism is useful, but I'd hold off on the conclusions until the end of the semester. Joe uncrossed his arms. Dai, sitting in the back, wrote something in his notes. What, 2 seats away, was already paying very close attention. 6 weeks into the semester, Emma sat in the academy library across from Dai, both of them working through the same systems theory problem set. Dai had approached her cautiously at first, embarrassed, perhaps, that he hadn't spoken up at the gate. Emma had not brought it up. There was nothing to gain from it, and she found him genuinely useful to study with. His pattern recognition was extraordinary. Can I ask you something? Dai said, not looking up from his screen. Sure. At the gate. When Joe stopped you. He paused. Were you calculating? The whole time. Emma thought about it honestly. Yes and no. I knew the rule was on my side. I knew making a scene would cost me more than it cost him. I knew if I waited long enough, someone with authority would walk by. She tapped her pen against her notebook. But I also just didn't want to move. Not because I was being brave. Because it was my gate too, and I was tired. Dai considered this. Humans are often described as irrational. Emotional. We are, Emma said. That's not always a disadvantage. At the end of semester review, Instructor High filed his formal assessment of the year's incoming cohort. In the section reserved for notable observations, he wrote 3 sentences about Cadet Emma. Demonstrates consistent procedural knowledge under social pressure. Adapts without escalating. Recommend for advanced track. Not because she shows no fear, but because she acts correctly in spite of it. He paused, then added a 4th sentence, something he rarely did. The academy is better for her presence. Joe did not apologize. Emma didn't expect him to. What she did notice, by the final month of the year, was that he no longer stood in doorways when she approached them. Small things. The galaxy moved on small things. Me and New York had largely stopped speaking to Joe, not out of loyalty to Emma, but because losing face publicly, in front of a senior instructor, had rearranged their social math. What had become Emma's occasional sparring partner in Jack's class, drawn in by the same quality High had identified, she didn't perform courage. She just kept going. Dai, at the year-end ceremony, stood next to Emma and watched the nebula shift colors through the academy's observation dome. Next year will be harder, he said. Probably, Emma agreed. Are you staying? She looked at the stars, all those impossible distances, all that cold and light and silence, and felt the particular human feeling of wanting to be in something, through something, on the other side of something hard. Yeah, she said. I'm staying.